If you've chased predators long enough, you've probably heard the legends. The big water pike that act like muskie, the lake trout that hit a swung fly like chrome, and the kind of northern fisheries you tell stories about the rest of your life. Today's guest is behind one of the most iconic fly-in operations in Canada, a place where 350,000 acres of water surround a 12-acre island, and where guides with 20 and 30-year tenures still cover new weed beds, new bays, and new fish every season. Today, we get into shallow water ambush points where midsummer giants slide in to warm their bellies, to the remote tundra lakes where lake trout crush swung flies in 3 feet of moving water. This is the Wet Fly Swing podcast, where I show you the best places to travel to for fly fishing, how to find the best resources and tools to prepare for that big trip, and what you can do to give back to the fish species we all love. In this episode, Jason Hamilton of Scott Lake Lodge is going to walk us through what makes their location in northern Saskatchewan such a unique opportunity. We're going to get into the early season temperature differentials and how this dictates where fish are holding and hanging. We're also going to find out the underrated world of swinging flies for lake trout. We haven't heard about this before. We're going to get into lake trout on a swung fly. You don't want to miss this. Big Lakers, pike. We're even going to talk grayling today. So here he is, Jason Hamilton. You can find him at scottlake.lodge.com. How's it going, Jason?
Very good, Dave. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to get into this one today. Northern pike, just pike fishing in general. We're going to talk about, your guys' operation at Scott Lake Lodge, what you do, how it's different. I've heard a lot about your lodge over the years, so I'm excited to jump into that. And then also the great thing, we've got this trip we're putting together, and we're actually doing a giveaway right now as we speak. We're launching this off, and somebody can go to wetflyswing.com/giveaway and get a chance to win a spot to come up to your lodge. So we're going to paint the picture of what that looks like. Before we get there, maybe take us back a little bit. Have you been at the lodge a while? What's your history? Have you been fly fishing since a youngster, or what's your story there?
Oh, I wish I could say I started fly fishing earlier, to be honest with you. Grew up on the Great Lakes, not fly fishing, gear fishing for brook trout and migratory rainbows. That took me into the fish guiding world and had been doing that for quite a number of years. Took a brief hiatus for about a decade to be a biologist up in the far north of Canada, and got back into the outfitting world here and been at Scott Lake for 15 years now, which still kind of the new guy, which is a testament to the culture that we have with our staff, because most of our guides have been there 20 plus, nearing 30 years in a lot of cases. So it's a fun place to work for them, a lot of water, and excited to be a part of it.
That's amazing. Yeah. So what is it about, because we've talked about just about every species, what is it about pike? And we are talking northern pike. Is there just one species of pike, or are there multiple subspecies?
Yeah, I think there's some subspecies further south, the chain pickerel and things like that. But we're chasing northern pike, Esox lucius, and they're musky-sized pike up in our part of the world. We sometimes eclipse that 50 mark. It's not something that happens every day or every year, but we certainly have caught fish over 50 inches, and it's just an incredible predator. And kind of the good thing about going farther north is we're pretty opportunity rich. In a day, you're going to have a lot of chances to cast to fish, and quite often a number of chances to cast a big fish. So then it's kind of up to the conditions of the day and the angler to make those fish get excited enough to hop on the fly or the lure.
Right. Wow. So, and this is going to be sight fishing, a lot of this. Talk about that. What does that look like when you're out there in the water? Are you seeing these fish coming up? Are you doing we'll probably get into some of the tips and tricks as well, like the figure eight and all that stuff. What does that look like when you're on the water with the fish?
Typically what we see for the pike fishing is it's happening in under 10 feet of water. And for the big part of our season, which is relatively short, we start the second week of June and go till the second week of September. So the first 6 weeks of that season, or 8 weeks of that season, the fish are in 2-3 feet of water. They're feeding in deeper water. They're coming up to the shallows to increase their body temperature, digest the food. And we're targeting them there where you're able to get up on the casting platform of the boat. The guide's going to be, slowly creeping around these back bays, and you're seeing the fish. They're often being pointed out, and even if you don't see them, if it's a cloudy or wavy day, the boat side strikes, you see it all happen, right? It's clear water, crystal clear water in most cases. So it's all happening right in front of you.
Wow. And what is, maybe let's talk a little on the gear. So somebody coming in there, we're always getting ready for trips and like, okay, I got to get that new rod. What is it typically if somebody's getting ready for this trip? Let's just say somebody's going to win this one. What rod, reel, line are they using out there?
For the early part of the season, a 9 or a 10 weight fly rod, floating line, and we're just a straight 30-pound fluoro or mono leader to bite wire tippet, typically that 26-pound AFW or 30-pound Rio. That's kind of the setup that we run. That works really, really, really well. Really liking the outbound short. A lot of our guides have adopted that as a real quick one because the casts are often not that long. You get into some of these small back bays, you're not trying to cast the full fly line. You just need to pick it up and put it down quickly. And so that sort of has been a line that's loaded up the rods quite nice, even for some beginning casters for us. And we kind of have a multitude of rods where we'll have some softer rods for newer casters and easier on the instruction. But then we've got our fleet of Helios fours for more advanced casters. So that's where an Orbis and Doors place and use their fly gear.
Perfect. And so you have different, like, is this set up your program for, let's say, somebody who's new, never fished for pike, or maybe even newer to fly fishing, probably has done some fly fishing but doesn't have a ton of casting experience, or maybe doesn't consider themselves a great caster? Can they go out there and have a chance at a pike?
Oh my gosh, yes. It is a perfect way to learn fly fishing. There are so many opportunities of fish of all sizes, and we have every year like just a ton of people that say, "Hey, you know what? That looks like fun. Let's give it a try." And our guides are good teachers. If you can get it out 10 feet, you've got a real good chance of catching a pike.
Oh, that's it. So yeah, just all you need is 10 feet. Yeah, right. Because what they're doing is, like you said, let's take it to July, because I think that's when we're going to be giving away the spot for the winner on this. Is I think it's July, early July. In July, what's going on there? So things are warming up a little bit. These fish are they eating down? They're predators, so they're eating fish. And then they come up to the warmer water, the shallow, to warm up and digest it.
Yeah, and what we're looking for is this differential between the main lake and these back bays, and before the back bays get too warm. So those fish will sort of gravitate toward the warmer water, and then, as I was mentioning, they're digesting food. It speeds up their metabolism. We're trying to catch them in there because that's just beautiful sight fishing. But a lot of times that we're focusing on just great ambush places, the mouths of these bays. In July, we're going to start to see cabbage weed and milfoil kind of grow up. And so you're fishing to these shallow weed beds. And again, it's a very visual style of fishing. So, a weed bed in 3 or 4 feet of water, you're still being able to pick out those fish, and you're still seeing the follows and seeing the strikes. So it's really exciting at that time of year.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. So, and you guys maybe take us back a little bit. We're going to get into more on the fishing as well, but take us back to the lodge itself. What does that look like when we're coming in there? Maybe talk about big picture. So let's say somebody's flying in from, lower 48 or something up there. Where do they fly into? What's the airport? What does that look like?
So they're going to fly into Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and it's a ton of good connecting flights direct from major U.S. cities. Once you get there, you head over to our charter hangar and you hop on our private charter. That takes you on a 2-hour flight up to a town called Stony Rapids, way in the far north of Saskatchewan, right on the border, Northwest Territories, pretty well. You hop on some float planes there. We've got some otters and caravans. Then it's about a 20-minute flight into the lodge. So it's quite a travel day, but a really cool part of the world.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. I feel like people with the travel there's some people that maybe don't like the travel as much. I'm one of those people that love all the stuff, and especially this is kind of cool. This is like, so you hop on a float plane, which is something I'll bet a lot of people haven't been on for the first time on that experience.
It's just this iconic way to explore the North, right? It's the Northern Uber. It's been up there opening up this country for so long, and just this cool experience to fly down low and see the trees and see, lakes and maybe animals and things like that. It's really neat.
That's so cool. Yeah, that's exciting. So you fly, and then when you come into the lodge, describe the lodge a little bit. Is it on, describe the area. It's on a big lake? Where are you flying in right down through the lake near the lodge? Describe that a little bit.
Yeah, Scott Lake is a huge lake itself, and then there's a couple of lakes that are connected. So right from the dock, there's about 350,000 acres of water that's available. So right in the middle of this kind of 5-armed lake, it's almost star-shaped, is this 12-acre island, and that's where the lodge sits. So you fly in there on a float plane, you hop off. There's this crazy community of like 60 people on there. You've got 26 guests at a time, and each pair of guests share a cabin. they've got their own standalone cabin that's really nicely appointed, and then there's about 35 staff with our pilots and all our different departments. So it's a wild little community on this 12-acre island.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now on the map. Yeah, well, so yeah, you're right there, close to, like you said, to the border to the Northwest Territories. And so, are you fishing? Do you head out on? Describe that. Like we fly in there. I'm guessing we get there in the afternoon, get settled in, and then get ready for dinner that first day. Is that what it looks like? And then hop out on the next day.
Yeah, you bet. You'll get in just about time for happy hour. We're gonna get you checked in. We're gonna, get you fed, have some cocktails if you want, and then do an orientation, make sure everybody knows what's happening and when. Next morning you start fishing. You've got 5 full days of fishing on a trip, and then about 4 o'clock the next day, or the fifth day, pardon me, you get off the water, you know, get cleaned up, packed up, and then you head down south to Edmonton again. Get there about 9 p.m. at night. So 5 full days of fishing and kind of packs in as much as we can in that trip.
Right. Wow. What is that day on the water? So talk about that first morning. What does that look like? We get up, have some breakfast. What are the boats we're heading out on?
Yeah, so you'll get up and have breakfast, and you chat with your guide the night before and kind of come up with a plan. One thing that's it's always tough for folks to reconcile the first day. They're so excited to get out. I want to get out at dawn. Pike fishing is not necessarily better first thing in the morning. We want the water to warm up in those bays and fish become more active. And often the best fishing of the day is the last few hours of the day. So we're trying to encourage people, like, don't break the door down, have breakfast, relax, get organized, kind of go through a little orientation with your guide, throw a few casts, and let's get on the water by about 8 or 9 o'clock. Fish till about 6. And then it's typically up to the group if they want to do a shore lunch. The guides do these incredible lunch preparation shoreside, or you can get a packed lunch to go from the kitchen and fish hard all day, which that's what we do on our flyouts. Flying to these different lakes for the day is a big part of our program. And so we've got a couple float planes and a bunch of pilots sitting on our dock, and we've got 24 other lakes that you can hop on a plane and have your own lake for the day. And it's just wild. The fishing pressure is spread around like 2 million acres of water.
Right. Yeah. There's not a lot of people. You're probably seeing, I'm sure, some occasional float planes flying by or around, right? But there's hardly anybody else out there.
Very few. It would be a rarity for us to see somebody else on the lake. A little bit of exploration, work is happening up in that part of the world for mining, but by and large, we're just seeing some wildlife and the other boat that might be with you in your group.
What is so we're talking about that July, you said June, July, August, kind of that summer period. Is it similar throughout that whole period, the fishing, or does it change? And then what happens, kind of as you get towards the end of the season? Does the fishing just shut off? Do the fish move? What's going on, say, in October?
We haven't been up in October in quite a while, so the fishing is pretty consistent. We do see the pike as you get into sort of first, second week of August, depends on that water temp. They'll drop a little, little lower and start to stage on weed and rock much more, in that 10 foot range. So certainly achievable with a sink tip or a sinking line. We catch a lot of fish in the cabbage weeds late season, but what the limiting factor is for us as we go into the second week of September, it's just gets to be fall up there.
Yeah, it's getting right. You're up there.
Yeah, it can be variable weather. It can get cold. It can snow, and so we've just found that there's a kind of law of diminishing returns with fog and cold and weather. Once you get into that second week of September, it really starts to feel like fall.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, when you spread out and you look at the map, you go across. I always compare everything to Alaska since that's kind of what I've spent more time in. And if you go straight across, I guess the latitude, it puts you right in near Anchorage. You're kind of in that same range. So yeah, I mean, the same thing up there. By the time you hit, I've been up in northern BC and all that, and October can come quick, right? The weather can change really quick from September to October.
Oh, indeed. And if you look at how the tree line runs, so the further east you go, the lower in latitude the tree line goes. So it's just colder climate as you get towards that interior of the continent. So we really see, September, this third week of August, fall starts, and you might really get some great weather later in the season, and we have this cool phenomenon where the lake trout come up shallow, getting ready to spawn, and it's phenomenal fly fishing. It's just really incredible. But as you get towards the end of the second week of September, I mean, we could have nights in the teens and 20s and daytime highs of the 30s, and then the big factor, the lake and the air, obviously are different temps, and fog comes in the fall. Being a fly-in only place, we need VFR, flight regulations to be able to see where we're going in the float planes, and it becomes a much tougher way to move people.
No, and you mentioned the lake trout. I think that's another big piece of this. I know a lot of listeners of the podcast love talking about new species. So pike is definitely one, but lake trout is also one that we hear a lot about, but it's hard to get to. So talk about that. Is in July, in that period, these fish are not going to be way down at the bottom. There's going to be a chance to get them higher up in the column.
Yeah, there are certainly going to be a chance. The trout won't really set up into the deep holes until later in July. But there's going to be fish down there, and there's a couple ways that you can target them at that time of year. Around moving water, inflows and outflows, we're going to see still some trout hanging on, depending on weather and water temps up there. I know a few of our guides had been, casting trout spay for them in some of the rivers that flow out of Scott Lake and catching them into July. Really, really neat opportunity, and they're just great fighters. Again, on a windy day on shorelines, you can cast, sinking lines and have a chance to target them in July. And then I know that we've been playing around with, a full 20-foot section at T20, and you just drop it down and let it settle down to 80 feet, two-hand strip it up, and these fish, come rocketing up. And it's different fishing, right? It's not the visual side of it, but on a lot of our flyout lakes, which are often 100 miles or more north from where Scott Lake sits, July still shows a bunch of lake trout shallow. We've got a couple lakes up on the tundra that the trout are going to stay shallow in the rivers all year round. There's, chances to swing for them and chances to really, really have some cool opportunities at big fish in 2-3 feet of water.
Is that, so yeah, you guys go across the Northwest Territory and you're able to fly into there and fish those areas up there?
You bet. Yeah. And the ice doesn't leave a lot of those locations until early July. So, it could be still icebergs floating around if you guys head up there when you're up.
Nice. Yeah, I see it. Yeah, that's huge. Obviously, it's kind of a crazy world when you look at a map because it's far up there north, and Northwest Territory goes all the way up to the, I guess, is that the Beaufort Sea?
Yeah, that's the Arctic Ocean there. And really, there's not much north of us, between us and the Arctic Ocean. We fly up to a couple lakes about 250 miles away. They're just gigantic lakes on the tundra. Their fishing pressure has been extremely minimal over the years. And
is that like the Great Bear Lake up there?
That's a little out of our purvey. That's a fair bit west, but we go kind of straight north of Scott Lake and a lake called the Blount Lake, which is, about 60 miles by 40 miles. And it just needs a ton of exploration. There is so much water to explore there, and it's a giant river system that comes right north of Scott Lake. The headwaters are very close, and we fish a lot of the headwaters lakes on this river, and then it eventually dumps into Hudson Bay by Baker Lake, which just a huge system.
So that gets us in, perspective as far as the geography a little bit. Let's take it back to pike, because I think that's going to be the species, I'm guessing, day one. Are we going to mostly be going out in boats, or are there going to be some people that might be flying out each day, these different areas? And our pike, how far up are pike? Are you getting pike all the way up north into the Northwest Territory?
You bet. Our pike seem to taper off about 150 miles north of Scott Lake. That's about where we see the productive pike fishing taper off. It really becomes more of a trout fishery and grayling at that point. But we're going to have a real good mix. There's going to be half the camp is going to hop on float planes, fly out to these different lakes, hop in boats there, and they're going to be fishing up in the territories. And the other half of the camp is going to be jumping in boats at Scott Lake, and you're going to be fishing around there. And there's Wigness Lake attached to Scott Lake, Premier Lake attached to Scott Lake. So the guides will sign up for their own section, and each boat has their own section of the lake for the day. So you're not fishing dirty water. You're not kind of in competition with the rest of the group. You have your own deal that day and get to explore.
Experience the waters of Bristol Bay at Togiak River Lodge, where fly fishing meets Alaska's rugged beauty. This is the place to complete the Alaska Grand Slam with all 5 salmon species, rainbow trout, Arctic char, and more, where each day offers a new Alaskan adventure. You can visit TogiakLodge.com right now to start planning your Bristol Bay experience with Togiak River Lodge. If you're looking for a world-class fly fishing experience, it's time to check out Mountain Waters Resort. Nestled along Newfoundland's legendary Portland Creek, this spot has a history that runs as deep as the Atlantic salmon that call it home. Once a fly fishing retreat for the great Lee Wolf, today it's your turn to step into these historic waters and swing up your salmon this year. You can head over to wetflyswing.com/mountain waters right now and make it happen. That's wetflyswing.com/mountain waters. Let's get out there today. Wow, this is awesome. Yeah, okay. So we're kind of setting the stage here, like we said. What is on the pike? Let's take it to the water. So we're out there. We're heading out, not super early. We get out there at 8 or 9 or 10 in that range. What does it look like when you're on the water? Are the guides, I'm guessing, going to an area where they know there are fish, maybe working? What is that first cast? Describe that day, that first maybe morning on the water. What are we doing there?
Well, I sure hope that they're given a safety briefing and orientation as the first thing before you leave the dock, lets you know how to work all the in-reach gear and stuff like that. So what I would expect is the guides would not go probably right to the juiciest big fish spot right off the bat. I think they want to gauge the skill and get people warmed up a little bit, make sure the knots are good.
For somebody like myself who has never fished for pike before, we've done lots of podcast episodes of all, but I haven't fished. So somebody new to it, there's that piece where you want to see, hey, okay, can they cast? What, like all that. So yeah, so that's the first step. So take them out to an easier place maybe where they can get more fish and save the big ones for a little bit later.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if it's let's just say it's perfect conditions. It's a sunny day. There's a little bit of south wind. There's a little bit of chop. Okay. Once that sun gets a little higher in the sky, now we're going to go start hunting some bigger fish. And then they'll go into these back bays. And often there's like a kind of a shallow, rocky front to the bay. You've got to trim the motor up and back in over that. And all of a sudden you've got this pocket that's kind of silty, dark bottom, heats up real quick, and these fish are just laying in there. You kind of look like logs at first, these big pike. So what they'll try and do is get the sun at your back, so you're able to see them. Polarized glasses are absolutely critical to this process. And then all right, there's a fish right out there facing this way at 30 feet or 20 feet, and try and put it right on them and then see if they're gonna bite. And I think a lot of times the guys are using larger flies to start, and if the fish turn out to be a bit indifferent or sluggish, then we'll sort of trim down on the size of the fly. And I know we've been having great luck on this tiny leech, as the last resort, like an 1.5-inch black bunny leech, this tiny presentation, and then all of a sudden this fish that has just been neutral and then indifferent to all the things you're throwing at it. You throw this tiny little fly at it and it just comes up and sucks it in.
And what is big? What would be a big fly you might start with out there for pike?
We're probably not throwing musky size stuff too often. Later in the season, when we're trying to get deeper in the weed beds, we would. But like a 5-6 inch, any sort of bait fish imitation, a lot of loud colors, a lot of black and orange and red and yellow, but classic shallow water, classic early season when you guys are going to be joining us, bunny strip leech, and that's 3 to 4 inches typically. That's going to be what's taking a pile of fish every day.
That's it. So literally, a simple bunny leech with a bunch of flash, whatever colors you want to throw on, and you're imitating. What are you imitating? There's these bait. What are the bait fish that are out there, like the species? Is there a bunch of different ones?
Yeah, there's burbot, which the leech could imitate a burbot, and then Cisco, which would be more of that traditional sort of white silver bait fish mimic. But there are leeches in the lake, and so it's just this shallow water snack that we sometimes see pike feed on. They'll go and eat themselves or lake trout or burbot or whitefish down deep, and that smaller meal in the shallows, because if they're in the shallows, chances are that they're already stuffed. And we see a lot of tails of fish, when we catch these fish. So you're trying to give them like the, one more wafer thin mint here to tempt them into feeding a bit more that day. Yeah.
Yep. Like that to see if they're just sitting there stuffed, and they're like, what? They're such predators, they can't pass up next, even though they're full. They're still eating.
Well, they got to have that opportunistic outlet, because winters are so long up in our part of the world, and I'm sure that they do feed under the ice a little bit, but it's like an 8-month period of ice cover almost. So they've got to recover from the spawn, which is under the ice in late May, early June, and then kind of put on that weight and get ready for a long winter ahead.
That's awesome. So yeah, so you've got these bigger patterns you're working, and then, but when you're seeing these fish out there, you'll see them just sitting there, just hanging out, warming up. And when you make that cast, are you making it kind of right in front of it and letting it sink down to them? Or talk about that first, and then what does the take look like when you do that?
Well, you're trying to get it close, especially with the big fish. You don't want to cast too far away and then bring it by, because what happens in a lot of cases, the smaller fish are going to be maybe a little more aggressive and dart in and try and steal that fly. So you might spook that big fish if you cast 20 feet past it. I think you want to get within 3 or 4 feet of it. That's land it softly as possible. Sometimes though a little commotion works to wake them up. Typically a pretty slow methodical strip, and the strikes are extremely varied. It just depends on the mood of each individual fish. Sometimes you might have to drop that fly in the bottom and just shake it there for 30 seconds, and all of a sudden you see this big torpedo tip up, and then just a puff of silt and your fly is gone. Other times they hear the fly hit the water, you see them look around for what's happening, and they'll chase it 20 feet as you strip it back to the boat. Like, it is kind of variable. And you've probably heard this in a lot of senses, but strip sets. We love strip sets.
Yeah, strip sets. That's the key. No trout sets out here. Strip.
No, pike are generally pretty forgiving, because if they're going to eat it, they're gonna eat it. But especially on some of the larger patterns, they get with all the teeth, they get all the feathers and fur kind of tangled in their teeth. You got to move the fly to actually set the hook.
Right. Yeah, you don't want him to just be stuck with a little bit of a feather and then he's not even hooked up. You got to make sure to set it.
And we do see that a lot of times. I'm sure you'll see that a number of times throughout the trip, that the fly is just kind of stuck in there in all the teeth, and it's easy to pull out.
Crazy. What are these teeth like when you pull that fish in your guide? I'm guess your guide's handling it. Do you ever have a client that holds that fish up? Are you still getting some good photos and stuff? Is the client ever holding the fish, or is it usually the guide?
We really try and focus on the guide holding the fish. I know there's some clients that have had a lot of experience with it. Reaching up into the pike's mouth, they've got a bunch of rows of teeth. The gill rakers are very sharp, and there's like a large ring of teeth around the outside of the mouth, but the top of their mouth and their tongue have these backwards facing teeth as well.
Right. So the prey can't get out once it's in.
Oh, exactly. And if you make a wrong move, it really is going to ruin your day. We've had a number of people have to go for stitches, and the guides, included. You're not lipping them like the bass.
No. How do you when you get that in? Do they just tail it or do you net them first, or how do you?
We've got great big catch and release nets. So these are like musky size nets. The smaller fish, the guys have handled so many fish. Typically what they'll do is they'll, just grab the line and then unhook the fish with the barbless hook boat side, if we're not trying to get a photo of it. And we'd really try and promote, like, hey, if you've caught a big fish before this trip, let's not take it out of the water. The fish grow so slowly in our part of the world. Like a pike that would be 40 inches, could be 20, 22 years old. A pike that's like in that higher 40 range, could be older than 30 years old. So we really want to take care of them and make sure that they, don't get injured in the sport fishing side of things.
Is that when you guys do it? It sounds like obviously we're all fly anglers, but also we have a good chunk of people that are doing conventional stuff too, and listeners, I'm sure. Do you guys have that up there where you actually have people, if they want to do conventional or fly up there?
You bet. Yeah, we've been getting more and more fly every year. We certainly, love those single barbless hooks, and the fly anglers, it's a great fit for them. But we probably are like 60 conventional, 40% fly at this point. And, again, we go barbless hooks, and we try and make sure that that's as easy as we can on the fish.
Is the fly versus conventional, is it easier to catch them with conventional gear, or the fly guys do pretty well?
I think in the shallows, the fly guys do better. It's a more subtle presentation. You can control it a lot longer at a certain part of the water column, so you're able to show that fish the fly for a lot longer in a lot of cases. That if you're reeling a spinner by it, you're going to get a reaction strike, but you might not be able to kind of tease them a little bit. As they get later in the season into end August and September, when they're on the rocks and it's a little bit snottier weather, I do see the gear guys kind of catch a few more, because they can get heavier lures, heavier gear, and you're easier to fight the wind.
So that's a little on pike. I think we're going to talk more about this too as we go, and I think we're going to have probably a follow up episode to dig more into this. But I also want to hear the lake trout. So is there a possibility we go out, let's say, for a couple days fishing for pike? We have great days, we get the pike, and then somebody's like, "Hey, I want to go hit lake trout the next day." Do you focus a full day on lake trout, or is there still a mix during that day?
It's really up to you guys. For the most part, the trout fishing, if they're shallow, it's going to be near good pike fishing. And so what we do is we try and get out to a lake, or a spot on the lake that has that inflow or outflow water. And typically that's a spot where we see good weed growth for pike. And if we can get into some trout below the rapids, awesome. We can certainly do the deep drop. It just takes a little bit more patience. For myself, if I was went out, caught a handful of them doing that, that's probably okay for me. But I like catching them, in shallow water on a swung fly, if at all possible.
Right. So that's it. And so you're able to catch these lake trout swinging flies down. So you got the pond you mentioned, or the bay where the pike have got into and they're hanging out. But then you got a little riffle to get in, like you said, where you trim up the motor to get in. And then below that, in that area, you've got these areas you can swing that are kind of like runs, and then it goes out to the bigger lake.
Yeah, not always. Like there's a few spots that I'm thinking of that if you're gonna really go target lake trout and look for a big one on the fly that time of year, it is a full river system. It's where a lake just completely outflows into a river, and there's 3 or 4 long runs and rapids. And actually, what we're really excited about is we just flew a jet boat into one of these giant lakes, and now we've got a real cool jet sled to go fish up and down these rapids. So I think the opportunity to go do that and try for some trout that have maybe never been messed with before is going to be really neat.
Amazing. Count me in for that one. That's I know there's people. We have a diversity of listeners, but I mean, there's definitely a good chunk of swing anglers who are loving different species, whether that's you name the species, and I think that for this, it'd be cool because you'd probably be using, we were fishing for Chinook out at Togiak Lodge this year, swinging for Chinook, and we were using like 9 or 10 weight spey rod. So I'm guessing, is it a spey rod thing up there, or you could probably use a heavy 2-hand or a single hand rod too for them?
You bet. Yeah. We've caught them on the single hand rods, the 9 and 10 weights just fine. And the smaller rivers, we've had a lot of fun with the 4 and 5 weight trout spey setup. But if you're going to go to some of these big rivers and try for fish that could be 20 to 30 or more pounds, then you're definitely going to, want something in an 8 or 9 weight, just kind of like that salmon steelhead setup.
Yep. Same thing. That would be amazing. Yeah. I can imagine for me this trip, getting a lake trout, getting a pike, even just that. But if you could get into one of those big trophies on a whatever, that'd be pretty epic.
Oh, it's just incredible. I mean, often when you catch them on gear, they have that depth. They have 100 feet of water to fight, but all of a sudden that you get them in moving water and 3-4 feet of water, they're just gone. I mean, they pull extremely.
Is that what they do? Do they go? So if you hook them in the rivers, they're just going. You got to slow them down.
Yeah, and they seem to the real big ones don't even act like they're concerned about being hooked. It's just a slowly, like, we'll see you later. Get ready to come and chase us.
Yeah. Wow. And is the swinging, is it just pretty standard, like any swinging for any other trout species, where you're just casting kind of across and letting it swing down and then working your way down through the run?
You can certainly do that. Actually, what we see a lot more, moving the fly, any sort of unnatural movements, anything that makes them want to chase. There's so much of lake trout behavior triggered by chase. They'll follow things for a long time, but that erratic sort of, so you're moving it a lot, you're kind of putting a bunch of movement in it that you would normally see. And then certainly on that dangle, on that hang down, if you kind of strip in really, really fast, like, you'll have fish that followed it, from the run and are just coming up and nailing it.
So cool. Yeah. Because when you look at the species, the lake trout are kind of like, the char, right? They're more similar to brook trout, Arctic char, all these species. So it's different than Atlantic salmon. I guess there's some similarities too, because Atlantic salmon are known as you put a lot more speed on them, right? They're aggressive versus, say, a steelhead, which isn't necessarily as much. What would the flies be that you're using for those when you're swinging for lake trout?
Very, very, very similar to the stuff that you'd swing for salmon and steelhead. Yeah, you're looking for big, flashy patterns. Certainly a little more in the like bait fish, white, silver. type things. Even blue purple, because a lot of times in the rivers, these lake trout are feeding on grayling. That's like lake trout candy. So something that kind of has a little bit of flash, has a little bit of blue or purple, and it really is a great fly for the rivers for trout.
That's great. I forgot about. So you could actually, if you wanted to, if you hadn't caught a grayling, you could probably catch some grayling too there.
Yeah, you bet. If you go to some of the, we don't have them on Scott Lake itself, but on the flyout lakes, the inflow and outflows of those lakes, you can get grayling, and it's starting to be a time when you guys are there in July. We get the freshet or the spring runoff is starting to taper off, and rivers set up so they're a little more fishable. In the first week of the season, we have water kind of usually backed up into the willows, and it's tough to really you know, find a spot because the fish are right in your feet in the willows.
Right on. And is the summer up there? What are the summers like? Is it pretty much you never know what the weather could be like, or is it pretty nice July, August in that period?
It is, really variable, but typically July has pretty stable weather. We wouldn't see a whole week where it's going to be snotty, rainy weather. That'd be very unusual. In July, we would expect to see that first 2 weeks of July be something that's like, wake up, it's high 50s, 60s overnight. You get into sort of high 60s to low 80s for your day. Then it just depends on which way the wind is blowing from. South wind, a little warmer, northeast wind, you're going to have certainly a little cooler conditions.
That's it. And so after, you go your season, September, you start to close things up. When what do you do in the off season? You got 8 months out of the year. Are you heading out going, you're done with Scott Lake? I'm guessing you guys kind of lock things up.
Yeah, we certainly, close things up, board it up. But then it's back to sales and marketing. It's back to hiring and procurement. And, we're pretty blessed. We've got a great following on Scott Lake. So we don't have a whole lot of spots that come open every year. And then we try and do a little hunting and fishing in the off season because it's a spot, it's a deal. I'm sure you've talked to a lot of other guides and outfitters that when you're in the season and you're running the lodge, it's not necessarily a recipe to go fishing a whole pile. So try and get out and chase steelhead with some pals on the BC coast and try and, do some fishing in the saltwater.
That's it. So you get your time. That's your vacation time is in the off season for everybody else.
You bet, yeah.
And I guess that's a cool thing is that you do have, you're not too far really. I mean, British Columbia, a little flight across and you're out down south and wherever you want to go hit some steelhead. But you're also kind of in the middle. When you look at it, I mean, you could head the other way. That's the cool thing is you can go for Atlantic salmon potentially, right? Out to, the whole Gaspé, kind of Newfoundland, all that stuff, right?
Yeah, you bet. That's something I've been really hoping to get to, but boy, our summer seasons are just intense, and we're up at the lodge for that period of time, and even in May we're in full construction mode. Really been kind of doing a bunch of improvements on the place over the last 10 years, and so it's a list that we kind of talk ourselves into every year, like, oh, would it ever be nice to have that cabin renovated or build something new like this, and then like over a beer at the end of the day you talk yourself into about 10 more projects.
That's right. There's always something to work on out there, but it's pretty cool because when you go out there, like you said, you guys are kind of right on this. I mean, it's this island, or not an island, but it's I mean, you're essentially on an island, right in the middle of this huge body of water, the lake, but then you have all these little channels and bays and everything. And do you guys have everything? I mean, I'm sure you don't have everything marked, but how much of an area do you guys have? You fished a good chunk of it, or is there still most of it that you haven't even seen yet?
Oh, they're on Scott itself. Scott is pretty well known, especially with our guide group. So many of them have been there like over 20 years. So they have spent a lot of days, uncovering all crannies. Any more of the guys have these fish finders and GPS units with forward-facing sonar and the ability to really dial in depth charts and kind of look for weeds and things like that. So we've found some more weed beds in the last few years just using this new technology. But a lot of the flyout lakes, they're giant. They're bigger than Scott. You can fit 2 or 3 Scott lakes inside of these lakes. We have got a ton of exploring to do up on these lakes.
When you look at the island that Scott Lake is on, it looks almost like a little town. I mean, it's kind of, it's not just these couple of buildings right here. You've got places spread. You got float planes on both sides of it. You got multiple docks. Is this just the Scott Lake? This is just your team out there, and it's just those are all the lodges. All those buildings are just different lodges.
Yeah, they're all, the waterfront on the south side would all be guest cabins, and then as you go up to the top, the top of the island, that's where the staff live, and then our north side is our industrial, sort of mechanical complex, and then the main lodge is sitting on the southwest side of the island, right up on top of the Esker. It's a pretty spot with a great view to have dinner and look out over the lake.
Right. What does that view look like when you look out over the lake? Are you seeing mountains out there, or is it pretty flat up here? This is like more like tundra.
No, it's hilly. You're certainly seeing this, some measure of topography. We're probably about 50, 60 feet above the water there up on top of the hill. So there's not mountains, not big hills, but you're going to get a couple thousand feet of differentiation in the topography there around Scott. And it's just you're looking south over the big portion of Scott Lake, and you see this beautiful view, and you guys are going to be up there waiting for sunset a long time because it's near 24-hour daylight at that time of year.
Oh, that's right. So you're getting the light. So you're going to have the full. That's the other amazing thing. Yeah, I'm a big fan of. Yeah, it seems like it's cool to be there that time. I mean, I think you probably don't get the northern lights as much, right, as the fall or when you get. There's too much light there in the summer, right?
Well, I'm sure the northern lights are happening, and we just can't see them. That second week of July, you're going to be able to, read your book or be outside almost 24 hours. It gets a little dusky around 2, 3 in the morning.
Yeah, I'm kind of that late night owl sort of thing. I love that thing where, and we did this at Togiak Lodge up in Alaska. Is that it was the same thing, man. It was whatever midnight, 1 in the morning. You can go out and you sometimes wake up and go out there like, wow, this is just like it's like morning. It's light. And it's really this unique thing. How do you guys, is that something that's hard to get used to every year when you go up there and you have all this light in July?
It takes, I can't speak for everybody, but I think the folks have been doing it a while. It's second nature. Like we don't really worry about blinds on the windows or trying to, sleep blackout. Like the cabins that the guests are in are all blackout cabins, so it's very dark in there, but you just kind of get used to it. And it's more of a job where you sleep when you're tired, and when, there's things to do, you're up and ready to go.
That's right, in the off season. Do you know the history of Scott Lake? It seems, I mean, like I said, it looks like it's this own town. How did, how long has this been out here? Is this something that's owned by, has it always been owned by a private company, or describe that a little bit?
So Scott Lake started out, it was a commercial fishing enterprise. They had looked at getting into commercial harvest of whitefish and lake trout in the late 60s. And what had helped us out, I guess, as a rec fishing lodge, it wasn't the top grade of whitefish they were looking for. And because there was no winter road in there, it was expensive to undertake this. So it transitioned into the 70s to this tiny fishing camp. There was one building, and I think they had 4 or 6 guests up there at a time, and that had gone through 2 different owners into the early 90s. And so the current ownership regime had taken things on in the 90s, and since then kind of really been improving it, making it into the lodge that you see today. So it started out with much fewer guests and much fewer staff, and the infrastructure needed a lot of work, but yeah, it's been pretty wild to watch for the last 15 years.
Right. Yeah. The last 15, you've really seen this thing where, I mean, what do you think, what do you attribute the success of it to? Is it kind of just word of mouth, or people, getting up there and seeing this, or, because it sounds like you guys are pretty well booked up now, and it's, and I've heard, like I said, I've heard a lot about it over the years and haven't been there, but it sounds like you guys have some good stuff going.
It's just a great culture. It's a culture of like very intense and personalized hospitality and customer service that's been set up there. The team buys into that. People feel like they're friends, they're well taken care of. We've got very nice infrastructure that we've been putting together, but it's the community of people. It's, we put our staff and we trust them to be with the guests all the time, having drinks at the bar, having fun, in the service roles, and they're great ambassadors and form these friendships and relationships with the guests, and the guests form these relationships with the staff. They keep on wanting to come back.
And so do you where do you live during the off season? What town are you staying in?
We just moved to a place outside of Calgary, Alberta, so we're in a place called Water Valley, and pretty excited to get a little river fishing in through the winter months when it warms up now. Before it was all ice fishing.
Right. And the great thing is Calgary, yeah, I mean, talk about a famous place. That's definitely, as far as, up in Canada, that's one of The what's the big river that goes through Calgary?
The bow.
Yeah, the Bow, exactly. And we've done some stuff there. What about your guides? Are your guides coming? It sounds like they've been up there a while. Are they coming from all around doing other things throughout the year, other areas guiding and stuff like that?
Yeah, they're anywhere from Costa Rica, Nicaragua to almost all the provinces of Canada. And a lot of them do traveling in the off season, or they'll guide for big game or waterfowl or other fishing. So it's a pretty cool, diverse group that have a pretty cool skill set. Have seen a lot of things in the outdoor space.
Nice. Well, I want to take it out of here. We have a segment we kind of call our coffee talk segment. Again, we're sitting here. It's morning, drinking a little bit of coffee, but I want to get into maybe just a few tips and talk a little bit more on gear. And I always love to start off with Patagonia. Today's sponsor is Patagonia, and we've been wearing their Swift Current waders. It's been really awesome this year because they're a great company. They do a bunch of stuff for conservation, all that. So the first question for you as we take it out of here is on that, the conservation piece. I know Patagonia really focuses on that. Have you guys seen anything up there? It seems like you're so far north. Have you seen changes in climate, changes in water temperature, or things so far up there that things are pretty stable where you're at?
Well, it seems like there's more variability, even in the last 10 or 15 years since I've been there. It seems like summers, when you speak to people that have been there quite a while, they had a pretty good expectation of how the summer weather was going to progress. It seems like things have shifted a little bit, so we're nicer into the fall, maybe a little cooler in June. Again, that's fairly anecdotal with a fairly small sample size. So, but there was a number of years where the guide team has kind of shared with me where they said, you could expect that June and July were very nice and hot months, and then by about the third week of August, with a couple of cold fronts interspersed in there, it would cool down. But boy, we're seeing like mid to late September, just great weather now. The last 5 years, so we're hopeful that it just keeps stable. Stable's good for fishing.
Stable's good. Yeah, I think that's probably what it is. The fact that you got these giant, deep water, reservoir, not reservoirs, but lakes, versus say some of the other areas where maybe it's brook trout fishing in a stream, water temperatures are warming up and fish are struggling. It feels like you guys are, and you're up north. You're up in the place where, as things warm up down south, people are probably going to migrate, further north as we go, in the long term, maybe, depending on what happens, right?
Yeah, we're insulated from a lot of those water temperature, related issues that you see, the hoot owl restrictions on some rivers and things like that. Our ice free season is so short that we never really get these like water temperatures to a point where it's unsafe to fish in them, and irresponsible to continue fishing. So
yeah. Do you guys have? I know Phil Roy is a big partner with the podcast. He does our Littoral Zone podcast, and he's probably not far from where you are. I think he's definitely in. I can't remember if he's somewhere up in Alberta, but
yeah, he's not far at all. Phil's actually been up and visited us one time up at the lodge. He filmed a show with us.
Oh, cool. Yeah, he did. Okay, I'll have to. Yeah, I'll have to. That's right. I knew that might have been the first place I heard of your guys' operation, but yeah, I mean the Stillwater thing is again is huge. I think a lot of people are. I've always loved Stillwater fishing, but do you guys find that? Do you think that that's growing? Have you seen more growth in just on your end from Stillwater fishing and kind of for fly fishing?
Indeed, it seems like there's more acceptance for pike from fly anglers, that this is a cool predator, and there's a lot of opportunity, and you get a chance of catching some real big fish, fishing maybe up to 30 pounds. So we're seeing a lot more people that I think were real focused on, stream trout and, anadromous fish on the coast being like, man, pike is a cool fish. Like, I didn't realize that they would fight like this. I didn't realize we could sight fish, to them. And I didn't realize that I could get maybe 50 chances a day to throw cast at these fish.
Yeah. So and that's the other, and we haven't talked about that, but that's the other big thing is that when you compare a muskie versus pike, muskie is really that fish that's a cast or a fish of 10,000 casts or whatever, right? But pike, which are kind of very closely related, right? Are you get a lot more shots just because of the species.
You bet. I mean, we just have more pike in our system than a typical muskie, a system would have muskie. So it's not crazy to think that you could catch 50 fish for one fly angler a day. We have many, many stories of people catching more, but I was out in a boat with a gentleman last year, and he kept on telling me to fish. Like, you throw the fly too. Yes, you catch the first 50 and I'll jump in when you're done. And son of a gun, by mid-afternoon, he's like, hey, this is 49. Next one, like, you got to get off your butt and start casting.
That's awesome. So you did it. So you got out. That's, I mean, that is the amazing, because the numbers thing, it's not all about numbers, for sure. But when you hear that, it makes you think like, wow, I'm probably going to have some action and likely have a chance at a big fish too. That's the other cool thing, right? A 30-pound, 50-inch fish, whatever it is, it would be crazy. When you hook one of those fish, is the fight varied too? Or is it, what's that fight like?
Typically, you get a couple good runs right off the bat. It's not going to be like something, a bonefish taking you way into the backing, but a big fish is going to move some line in a hurry. You're going to get the fly line out, and then if you have any sort of depth in the water, they're going to try and stay down. You really can see the bigger fish are going to stay down on the bottom, and you're going to have to, really turn them to pull them up. If you're in that real shallow water, they're going to be a lot more darty. They're going to be, kind of moving laterally around just because there's no place to really bulldog down.
And so as we take it out of here, I have a couple of random questions, but I want to get some tips. I always love to get a few tips. So we're going to be on this boat. We're going to be looking for pike. What are you telling me or whoever's on that boat that first day to have more success? Is there a couple of tips you would recommend?
Keep your fishing area neat. Make sure that you don't have a bunch of gear and things like that open on the casting deck beside you.
And you're on a deck here? To describe that a little bit, is this like what type of boats are you using? What does the deck look like?
Yeah, they're 16 or 18 foot aluminum V-hull boats, and so it'd be like a walleye style multi-species boat. There's an elevated casting deck on the front, and then we have a smaller casting deck in the middle for the two anglers. But really making sure that you've got your line able to get that out quickly, make a good cast. That's really a big part of it is if you flop the cast and scare that big fish away, it might only be one chance at that fish. Often there's more. But just keeping a clean house and taking the time if you're changing flies with your guide to, make sure that you're passing your fly box back and your tools back, so you don't have one of those moments where the big fish strikes and then all of a sudden you're wrapped around your foot and away she goes.
And are most people just out there in, what are they wearing? What's the clothes? I'm guessing not waders because you're on the boat. Or are you just sitting there in your regular clothes, or what is that like?
Yeah, just regular clothes. Often, summer flip-flops or bare feet, or, those sort of ankle boots are more than enough for what we're doing. We've got a bunch of waders up at the lodge, so if folks want to, jump in the water and fish some of the rapids, we can accommodate that. We got boots and waders ready to go. But yeah, typically like just summer fishing stuff, sun shirts, lighter pants, and if you've got to layer up for a colder day, then it's just the standard sort of deal where you throw on some mid layers and then your rain gear.
Well, and like we said, so we're going to be on the water. The tip, it sounds like there's not too much. I mean, I guess casting is something I always think about. You're using a heavier rod. Like you said, like a 10 weight is typically a 9-foot 10 weight. Is that your typical?
Yeah, 9 or 10 weight. I really like the 10s because on the bigger fish, the 9s work perfect for your average pike. The bigger fish, the 10 gets them to the boat quicker. You just kind of speed that fight up. You have a little more control. The fish go back, release a little quicker.
Yeah. Okay. So the 10 weight's good. And I guess kind of practicing, if you've never casted a 10 weight, it's a heavier rod. So that's probably a good tip also to maybe practice and work on what do you think distance wise? 30 feet, being accurate at 30 you can land it on a pipe plate. Is that kind of like the saltwater thing, a similar deal?
That would be more than enough. Again, pike are pretty accommodating. The bigger fish, though, if they're 30 years old, there's a good chance that they've seen this show before, and you don't want to do something that's completely crazy and just drop it on their head with a big splash and send them out of their kind of ambush spot. But definitely being able to cast and cast without a whole bunch of back casts.
Yeah, like one back and then cast.
Yeah, that's great, especially if fish are moving. Sometimes you're going to see a cruising fish, and you don't want to waste a bunch of time trying to get lined up there.
So you might see a fish actually in those shallows cruising, and you want to put it a few feet in front of it, and so it sees it and goes.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, wow, this is great. Okay, and I guess the last one here, I'm kind of thinking I want to, again, get ready for this trip. We're going to be heading up there, the Pike. Any other I guess on the gear thing, anything else to think about that would be we don't want to miss? I'm guessing you guys probably have a gear list you send out to clients beforehand, but is there something important that's different?
Typically, just the clothes packing list. We've got a pile of rods and reels up there for, ready to go for everybody. We got all the flies up there for everybody. We'll send some things out about the type of flies that you want to tie. And, if you get a chance to talk to some of our guides, they're going to tell you all their favorites, and everybody's got their personal ones. We're seeing a few of the guys going towards sparser flies, not as much material on them, and they seem to move a little bit more in the water. But what I'd really encourage is good pair of polarized sunglasses. And if it's in the budget or you already have them, something in that like silver sunrise or a higher light transmission lens. And then something, for the afternoons with a higher sun, an amber lens with a green coating would be really, really important, because we find people that don't have, great sunglasses are missing a little bit of the show, and the show is so much a part of that pike fishing in the July season.
So the glasses, the amber are good for the afternoon with the high sun, and then for the lower sun, earlier you're saying the more the silver. What's the best lens for that?
Like the Costa does a silver sunrise, and I'm sure that the Maui and Smith, do something similar, but it's more of a yellow or a copper lens, and it's a higher light transmission.
Yeah, and I love the yellow for just a little lower light conditions. You get more light coming in, so you can still see really well.
Yeah, and if you get some cloud or you get some smoke, from wildfires, which in our part of the world it happens every summer. It just depends on how close or what the wind direction is. Just makes for a little flatter light.
Yeah, the fire stuff is definitely. I mean, where we're at every year. I think August. On the east side, there's always going to be fire. It's just that's part of probably the climate change thing, right? Things are changing a little bit on us, but good. Well, the one random one I have before we get out of here is it's kind of our music, movies, or podcast question. Are you throughout the year, if you're traveling, are you listening to more? Are you watching YouTube, movies, sort of stuff, or are you more podcast or music? What's your go-to?
Oh, in the truck, it's been podcast steady. I spend a lot of time in the truck driving around this central part of Canada, so it's podcast 90%. And then sometimes if I gotta stay awake, I'm putting on some classic rock or some old punk rock or something like that.
Awesome. Do you have a podcast show that you love, or what's your style? Do you listen to all sorts of stuff?
Yeah, anything with the outdoors. Niska and In the Bucket. I mean, it's some kind of beat.
Oh, good. You've been catching Niska stuff?
Yeah. Some, BC steelhead fishing. Like, obviously I'm listening to that stuff, but anything, hunting, fishing, conservation, I try to listen to a lot of that and just keep up to date with what's going on in the outdoor space.
Nice. And what about music? What's your classic rock? What's one group or song or something?
Zeppelin.
Nice. Love it. I'm going to put some Zeppelin in the show notes for this one. I always love to get a chance to. There's so much. Is there an album or a song that a favorite album of theirs?
Far Away. It was in a skateboard movie from when I was a kid, and it was always it just always resonated. Just great track.
God, I know. Zeppelin was so good because they had that thing where they started out slow, that slow, and then they build it, and then they're just rocking out, right?
Oh man, and it's just great instrumentation. It's great guitar, great drums. Yeah,
that's awesome. I'm going to listen to that right now. I'm going to hit that up on Spotify, Over the Hills and Far. And that's a song, right? So that's the song, and that's also, I'm not sure if that was one of their albums or not, but that's definitely one of their songs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. All right, Jason. Well, I think we can leave it there. We'll send everybody out to ScottLakeLodge.com. And, I'm excited. First of all, we got this giveaway. So somebody, lucky winner, is going to win a trip and all the gear up to yours. And then also to go on this trip. It's amazing, having a chance. And we're going to be sharing the good word as we go. So thanks again for all your time today. And we'll talk to you soon.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure. And we look forward to hosting you guys up at the lodge.
There you go. If this is in your bucket list, if you're thinking about lake trout or pike, definitely check in with me, Dave at wetflyswing.com. We're going to be going up there this year. Would love to hear if you're interested. The best way to get access to some of these trips is go to Wetfly Swing Pro. Also want to let you know, this is on YouTube right now. So if you're interested in watching the full length and watching me and Jason, our talking heads, chatting, you can do that right now on YouTube. And would love if you subscribe there and follow us. I'd also like to hear if you listen and watch on YouTube, send me an email, dave@wetflyswing.com. Always love to know if we should be doing more of that. We're kind of testing the waters right now just to see. Right now, I think most people still listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other apps. But if YouTube is a place, I would love to hear from you. And that's all we got today. Just want to remind you again, we've got a good week. This week, later, we've got James Garretson talking about New Mexico. We get into some big fish they're catching down here as well. So if you have anything else, check in with me anytime. This is Dave, and I hope you're having a great afternoon, a great morning, or a great evening, wherever in the world you are. And we'll see you on that next episode. Talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.